All right. We are at the top of the hour, so we will give a second for folks to join. Thank you to everybody that is here and on time. We appreciate it. We know you have a lot going on in your day, so we appreciate you taking a bit of it to spend some time with Hannah and I. We've got a lot of great stuff to cover, a lot of great conversations to have. So thank you so much for being here. As you are getting in and hopping in, feel free to share in the chat where you are dialing in from, where you're screen sharing from. We'd love to hear from you all. We've had folks that have joined these from all over the states in North America. We've had folks that have joined from all over the globe, from Europe, from South Africa, from South America. People are coming from all over the place. So we've got Atlanta, we've got Maryland, we've got Kentucky, we've got Massachusetts, Chicago, Memphis, Orange County. This is amazing. We've got people calling in with warmer weather than what I've got here in New York. So thank you for bringing the sunshine. Appreciate it. Although, and it's a pretty sunny day. It's not so bad.
I mean, it's beautiful over here in New Jersey. I don't think I've seen anyone from Jersey yet. So if you're in Jersey, make sure you say hi in the chat.
Come on, Jersey folks, raise your hands. Got some folks from
Maybe
Bulgaria.
just me.
Awesome. Yeah, it might just be you. It might just be you. Bulgaria is here. Folks from Buffalo, Nova Scotia. Awesome. South Africa, thank you so much for being here. We will continue to let other folks trickle in as they come, but we want to get started with our initial housekeeping before we jump into the session itself. Honolulu. Okay, I got to call that out. That's amazing. Thank you, everybody, for being here. A few rules. If you joined us for one of these before, these are familiar to you. I do want to cover them for everybody who may be new, as just as a reminder, because we do have a lot of folks who are dialing in today. First and foremost, today's a conversation. This is for all of us to be able to chat, to connect, to learn together, to build ideas together, to ask questions. And so as you've been doing in the webinar chat feature, sharing where you're located, make sure you continue to use it to chat with each other, to chat with us. You can toggle between, do you want to chat with just the host and panelists? That's Hannah and I, or do you want to chat with everyone? I highly recommend chat with everybody. Let everybody know what you're thinking, what your questions are, what you're chiming in on. Make sure you turn that on and let's get the conversation going. Hannah and I are going to have a icebreaker in a second too that you can make sure that you chime in on. Second, we will be recording and we will be sharing this after the fact. So expect about 24 hours out from today. So about midday Eastern Central Time-ish tomorrow, we're going to send you an email with the recording, with a link to some resources that you can follow up on. So today you can take notes, you can stay engaged, you can participate in the conversation itself. If we go over a topic pretty quickly, if I get too excited and talk too fast, don't worry. We're going to make sure that you have the content that you can follow up with after the fact. And then finally, we do have a lot of people joining. And so I'm going to clarify between the chat and the Q&A tab. If you do have questions that you want Hannah and I to be able to get to throughout the session today, please use the Q&A tab. That makes sure that I can get a hold of it and I can tee it up for us to be able to answer. Now, typically, we aren't able to get to every single question during the conversation itself. Some of it is because it's very practical and personal to your use case. Know that I see every one of those and we take them and we follow up with folks if they asked a question and we did not answer it. So please keep the questions coming. We will not ignore any. We will not go over any. If we can't get to it during the live session, that's okay. We're still going to make sure that we have time after the fact. So let's talk, let's stay engaged and keep the questions coming, but through the Q&A tab. All right. So who is this guy that's been blabbing at you for the last 3 minutes? Happy to have you all here. If you haven't joined us before, my name is Luke Reinebo. I use the pronouns he and him, and I'm the Senior Director of Customer Marketing here at Bitly. Super excited to host these conversations. My whole job is to make space for you all to be able to chat with each other, connect, learn best practices, and learn from people like Hannah. So Hannah, why don't you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Luke. And hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. So excited to be speaking with you all. My name is Hannah Corlang. I've been with Bitly a little bit over 5 years. Actually, we're getting closer to 6. I don't know how that happened so quickly, but I'm a senior customer success manager and I work with our enterprise customers. But during my time at Bitly, I've actually worked with a variety of different customers that we have with. So that means that I've worked with teams who are brand new to Bitly, brand new to connection platform and really link shortening and QR code creation. And then I also work with customers who have us deeply integrated in their tech stack and have been working with us for over 10 years. So the fun part of my job is that no conversation is the same because every team I work with, every company I work with, really cool brands, they're all doing different things and they're all working with Bitly and using Bitly differently, which is really one of the very exciting aspects of what we do, is that we really fit in seamlessly into every initiative. So with that, really excited to share a little bit more about SMS and Bitly in general.
Amazing. Thank you, Hannah. And the way that we've chatted about all of this over the last few weeks as we've gotten prepared for today's session, you just have so many different examples of ways you help different types of customers and clients achieve their goals with short links, which is just so amazing. I do actually have one more question for you. What are you binge watching lately? We want to get to know you a little bit better. Do you have any TV show that's just been something that you just can't put down?
I do. And I also have a 1-year-old, so we're typically a Bluey household at this point. But I've found a new show, which I think everyone here should watch, and it's on Amazon Prime, 007 Road to a Million. Think Amazing Race or Game Show to Win £1,000,000, meet James Bond. So I need everyone here to watch it. So make sure that they make a second season, because I'm hooked and I need it to never end. Watch
That's
it.
amazing. Andrea's watching Real Housewives of Potomac. I'm a Housewives head too, Andrea, so I'm right there with you. I think I'm probably binge watching some of those, but right now I'm going back to the Hunger Games. I'm rewatching those movies. So I cheated on the question, but I'm rewatching those as in prep for the new one that's coming out. So everyone else, drop anything that you are binge watching or any recommendations in the chat as we go, because we are going to jump into our topic. So as I mentioned, questions, Q&A tab, chat in the chat. Let's go. So one thing that we hear a lot from customers as we're shaping this series of conversations that we wanted to have is a lot of folks are sharing with us, whether they're brand new, whether they've joined us before, whether they're power users within Bitly, is they love using the platform. They're solving for a specific use case, or they came to us for one thing. We'll talk about short links in a second, which is primarily the way that historically people have come to Bitly for, but they feel like there's so much more they can do with the platform. And so when we asked folks, hey, would you want to hear how other people are using it and the best practices that go behind it? We heard a resounding yes, which is really the center of what we want to have around these customer conversations, is talking about best practices and how practically we can put Bitly in the connections platform to work for you all. We do hear oftentimes that there are 4 main ways that people are using Bitly in the connections platform. As you can see here, they're pretty clearly aligned to business goals. First, people are trying to connect with their audiences. They're trying to get out there and make stronger connections, whether they are internal audiences, whether they're audience on social, whether you're connected with your audience in your database. There's a lot that you want to do. Folks are trying to activate their brand. How can they put their brand in more spaces and help reinforce the way that people experience the brand of your business? A lot of folks are coming to us because they really want to track those connections. So whether you create a short link, you're creating a link in bio site, you're creating a QR code, you want to know, is it working or not? And then finally, people are trying to scale their efforts. And so we come around these 4 goals. And today we're really going to talk a lot about all of them, but I want to center around the ones that help us with helping to shorten links, connect with our audience, activate our brand. And that really is around the short link connection point. And so as you can see, Bitly can do a lot. We're going to talk about that top right section today around link management. And we're specifically going to talk about, after we get through some best practices around short links, we're going to talk about SMS. That is one of the things that we've heard time and time again, people are trying to learn more about. So as we go into this, I want to talk a little bit about the power of what short links can really accomplish and do for us. And so, Hannah, I want to tee it over to you to really kind of give us a high-level overview of what are you seeing people use short links for. And as Hannah is sharing that, I recommend that you all hop into the chat as well and share with each other how you're using short links. But Hannah, go ahead.
Awesome, will do. So as I mentioned before, short links are extremely versatile. They tend to live everywhere and anywhere as far as you're thinking about long URLs and needing a nicer short version. But typically our customers are coming into us with social media use cases. They might be looking at organic, potentially looking at paid. They most likely or potentially have a social publisher which they want to integrate with. And then from there, we tend to trickle into other departments, typically going into the marketing team. They might be thinking about print materials that they're creating that might be potentially retail, be that store promotions, which are externally facing, or promotions for individual customers, or offers that they're sending. Direct mail is typically an area that we see a lot of short links live as well, potentially also QR codes. But away from external communication with customers, we also see this a lot living internally at companies. Internal comms tends to be a pretty big use case as well, because you want to be able to really share and make easy connections internally so that you can also update potential knowledge centers internally, make sure that you can really track and understand the content that you're sharing, not just externally, but internally. And then away from that, we see feedback surveys is a big one that we see consistently, email marketing, and of course, that's just a drop in the bucket. Use cases are endless, but SMS is a big one that we're seeing a lot, and I'll table it for now because we're going to go into that in a lot more detail in a few minutes.
I love that, Hannah. And you covered a lot of different ways, like we mentioned, that you can reach out and connect with different types of audiences. And so we can use short links to connect with this external audiences. We can use short links to help track our efforts in our existing marketing channels. A common use case that you mentioned that I'm also seeing within the chat as well, people are talking about using for internal communications or communications with your communities, the folks that you're trying to engage day in and day out. So you can see what's resonating. You can see what they're clicking on most. You highlighted a lot of different ways that short links can be super versatile, which is really interesting. We do have a resource that I want to flag here. If you can pull out that phone and scan this QR code. If not, we've got the short link right below it. And finally, if not, we will send this in the follow-up email as well. So we make sure you'll get this link afterwards. But there's a ton of different use cases that people have for short links and ways that you can use short links in a lot of versatile ways. Continue to share those within the chat as well. But we want to make sure that we're hearing from you of how you're putting into practice. Now, before we move into overall SMS, we want to cover some best practices for short links, regardless of your use case. It's really specific to you, the way you think about short links. It's really specific to the goals that you're trying to accomplish, activating your brand, connecting with your audience, you want to scale your efforts. But Hannah has worked with so many types of customers. And so she's got a few things that she shares with every single one of them. Hannah, why don't you walk us through one of the main ones that you see is important for people to make sure that their short links are super effective?
Absolutely. So one of the most important aspects of Bitly is branding. So not just having the ability of shortening that long URL, but really branding it so it's coming directly from you to your consumer or whoever you're sharing this with. We have also seen that adding a custom domain, which based on this example, you can see the custom domain is removing the bit.ly and replacing it with your own custom domain, can increase the click rate by 34%. And the reason this happens is that, ultimately we love that our customers are using bit.ly, but really our preference is that we don't want your customers or people you're engaging with to know that Bitly is a part of this process at all. We want them to know that something is coming from you specifically for them, and it builds up that trust and makes it that much more engaging and that much more likely that they're going to actually press the content that you're sharing out. So custom domains is number one. Everyone should be utilizing them, and make sure that you take advantage of it.
Awesome. That's great. And Hannah, they tell me that there's actually a higher click-through rate when folks customize their URL. Is that correct?
That is correct. We see around a 34% increase, but again, think of yourself also as being a consumer. Are you more likely to press a bit.ly link when it comes in, or something that's branded specifically from the company that you're receiving the message from?
I love that. That's great. That's awesome. So there's some other kind of checklist things that you make sure that other folks have set up when we think about the infrastructure of how people are using short links and setting up just the best practices. So to walk us through some of your favorites that we've listed here of some quick changes that you can make to short links to make sure that they're as effective as possible.
So I'm going to try to breeze through these as quickly as possible, but keep in mind, the bells and whistles is that you now have a short link, you're using the custom domain, great. Let's take it one step further. Let's customize the back end of that link. Let's make that a call to action, make it stand out. And just thinking back to this deck that Luke is sharing, was it 2 slides ago? He shared a QR code and a custom link. So that custom link had a custom backend, which said, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was short link use cases. This immediately makes it that much more memorable. In theory, I could type that into the browser if I wanted to down the line, but it makes it really stand out. The next thing you want to think about is potentially a few days from now, me and Luke are going to go through this deck and maybe we realize, whoops, we actually think there was another piece of content that we wanted to share there instead. What we can now do is actually redirect that URL that we already shared and showed you to a new long URL. And that's ultimately what we call a redirect, which is updating the long URL that's associated with the short link. That's also something that's available within the account. But also what you want to be thinking about is metrics. So Luke has spent all this time and energy creating these links that are living in here and sharing with you today. We want to know, did anyone actually press them? Did they scan them? So we're going to spend some time after this and actually go through in Bitly to see how many people actually engaged with our links. Did they scan them? Did you copy and paste them? And then we can also look at the time frame. Did you do it in real time while we're speaking? Did you end up looking at the metrics or looking at the actual content we shared a few days later? All these things are going to help us shape what our next webinar might look like. And if potentially Luke wanted to take it up another step, he might share the same piece of content in here a few different times, and he could actually use UTMs to create 3 individual links. They all go to the same location, but on the back end, he might be interested to see which slide that people actually end up scanning or clicking the link from. And that way we can, again, tailor our next webinar based on what you guys are finding interesting and make sure that we can, replicate moving forward. And then lastly, again, this isn't necessarily just tied to links, but what we could also do is turn all these individual links that we're going to be sharing into a link in bio. Because once we share out the link in bio, again, we can update in real time. A link in bio is really a micro page where you can share multiple pieces of content at one time. And once we've shared out the link in bio, we can update the links that are on the link in bio without actually making any changes to what we've sent you. So we can keep refreshing, keep adding new resources based on questions that are coming in, and everything pretty much ties into each other within the Connections platform.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Hannah. And a lot of the things that you mentioned are really helpful as we take one step back before we start going to create a link. I think oftentimes we find ourselves where we need to shorten the link and we need to shorten it quickly, which browser extensions are really helpful with that. Going to Bitly quickly and shortening that link is really helpful for that. What we often see is folks that take that extra step beforehand, when you're not just on the run trying to share a link really quickly, of thinking about how they might all work together and how you can think about within your overall customer experience. People are a lot more effective, and you just hit on a lot of different ways that folks are able to do that, which is really helpful. I do want to read a few mentions in the chat as well that people had shared. And friendly reminder for folks, if you do want to toggle on and share with the entire audience versus just Hannah and I, you can go to that blue, I think, bar for all of you, it looks like. Instead of saying hosts and panelists for the to section in the chat, you can click to everyone. And that way everyone can participate in the conversation with you. People are saying that they use it for communicating in print, easy links to surveys and campaigns to internal partners. Check. Hannah, you talked a lot about that. We're seeing a lot of folks sharing that they share this on social, that they share this with email campaigns. This is really cool. People are talking about creating short links and QR codes to the same destination. Amazing. Really cool stuff. And we do see a lot of folks are having a lot more success when they take a few of these steps before they jump into creating their first collection of links. Your link in bio example is a great one there as well. We're getting a lot of questions that are coming in that are related specifically to SMS. I'm really glad because that's where we're going to pivot the conversation that we have today. Everything that we talked about so far is going to be applicable to the way that we talk about SMS as well. A lot of best practice that you want to apply to any short link also applies to the SMS use case. But if you did ask a question that we haven't been able to get to yet, we'll either save some time at the end or we'll make sure that we follow up with folks. But let's jump into the topic at hand. The reason why a lot of us are here to dive a little bit further in, because SMS is becoming a lot more frequent request that we are seeing a lot of customers are asking Bitly about, of how can Bitly short links be part of that overall SMS process. But we also are probably all seeing SMS marketing more within our day-to-day. I will say last week, I got probably the best text of my life. It was from an artist that currently had a tour called the Renaissance World Tour, Beyonce. She texted me, personally, I think, she texted me with a GIF that would look like it was tapping the screen to let me know that tickets for her new movie was coming out. That's a perfect example of a way that folks and artists and just folks with big communities are able to use SMS. Now, Hannah, you've gotten one recently too. Can you tell us about your recent SMS example?
Well, mine is definitely not as exciting as Beyonce. And Beyonce, why aren't you texting me? Like, what gives?
I think
But
we're going to find out why in a second. I think I was part of an automated campaign, Anna.
I don't know. I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed here. That was literally Beyonce sitting there saying, "Luke, don't forget my movie's coming out."
I
I think
wish.
that's what happened. On my end, again, not as exciting, but my hairdresser actually, or the salon, ended up texting me, reminding me that it's been a few weeks since my last appointment, and they actually linked me to her schedule so that I can schedule a new one. It was a great reminder because the time has come. So I'm going to be getting a haircut in the very near future. So thank you very much, Salon. I'm excited.
There we go. And those are two examples that we're seeing folks use SMS really effectively. Before we jump into the examples, though, Hannah, just give us the lay of the land. What is SMS and how should people be thinking about it?
So the way you should be thinking about SMS is really communicating directly with your audience. And ultimately, there's so many different ways of communicating with them and so many different channels. But what we've been seeing is that SMS offers that direct line to customers. And because of that, you tend to see faster engagement than other channels. So you can also just think of this as your own personal preference. I know for myself, my phone is sadly glued to me at all times. And I know that I read my text messages within minutes. I can't always say the same for my personal email. So what I appreciate whenever I'm engaging with my or companies that work with me or any company or deal or anything that's coming out, I like when they make it really easy and really super friendly and user friendly, really. So I can just pick up my phone and press the promotion 1, 2, 3, I'm there. So a lot of this is really geared around having that faster engagement.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. I'm seeing some questions come through both the Q&A and the chat around fraud and spam with SMS or protocols in place. These are really good questions. We're going to talk about general best practices in a little bit, so we'll hold that question until we get to that section. One thing, Hannah, that you just talked about that relates here is making sure, again, that we're thinking about this is an effective tool to be able to communicate with our audience. It isn't just something that we can just adopt and abuse, or we can just have sitting in our back pocket as marketers or as business owners or as folks sitting in operations and just blast the channel with anything and everything that we want. There really are two ways that we see people effectively using SMS. And so why don't you talk about the first one, which is really around like one-to-many SMS campaigns. How would you describe it and how should people think about using SMS campaigns?
Absolutely. So as far as one-to-many, as Luke mentioned, there's two different alternatives, especially when you're thinking about Bitly as part of the SMS campaign and really short links, how that ties in. So when you're thinking about one-to-many, you're thinking about, you have your SMS provider, and now you're thinking about you're sending out maybe hundreds or thousands of messages to individual customers, but potentially you're sending the same messaging to them. So it's really more, as you can see in this example, potentially as promotion or something that it doesn't need to be individualized to each individual person. Again, that's not what happened to you, Luke. Your message from Beyonce was individual, but it might also have fallen in a little bit more to one-to-many, where this was sent out to a larger group, selective, but larger group. And the way that you should be thinking about one-to-many SMS campaigns within Bitly is that you're creating most likely one short link that you're going to be sharing in the SMS campaign. So again, even if it's going out to a large group of people, you're really just creating that one link that's being sent out. Because it's typically lower volume on the Bitly side, you might be creating that link using the UI, so creating it manually versus using our API, but also you want to be thinking about metrics. So all the metrics you're going to get in are all going to live on that one link. And that way you can go into the UI and get a high level overview of what that performance looks like. So if you sent out that link to hundreds, thousands of people, you'll be able to see if you've got hundreds or thousands of clicks and also be able to see more granular information about potentially city, country level, times that you saw spikes, and that way you can tailor your next promotion based on what you saw with that click engagement. The other thing you can potentially do here is update and redirect that link. So again, you have shared it out, and if you need to change where it's being pointed to, you can do that at any point of time without needing to reshare or send a new link.
I love it. That's really helpful. Now, can I make this about me for a second?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I have a food truck business. If y'all joined us in August, you know that I've been working on this as a side project. And I really want to make sure that I'm using SMS for my new business that I just started. What are some ways that you recommend I get started with it?
All right. Well, congrats, Luke. Although
Thank
I'm
you.
not sure how happy Bitly is about this side hustle, but we'll say it's all working out.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. You have food truck, it's up and running, it's probably crushing it. Obviously, you're already using Bitly and you're probably posting using Bitly links on social all day long. And I'm sure, even though it's not in here, there's a QR code living on your truck somewhere. Why wouldn't there be? And you're probably also using our link in bio. So kudos to you. But now you want to start thinking about SMS messaging. So you've already found the SMS provider that you're going to be working with. Great, step one done. You've already started thinking about what kind of messaging do you want to be sending, what's going to be relevant, and you've landed on one-to-many messaging. This is mainly also to kind of get started, see how everything's working out, and see what's going to resonate with your specific customers. So you're, potentially a local food truck, which probably means that your menu is changing all the time, right? So you want to make sure that people are aware. So one of your first messages might potentially be sending out a mass message to everyone who's locally in the area, who's already opted in to receive messages from you, letting them know that you've updated the menu. And in that link or in that message, you've sent a link to your menu. And that way they immediately know, hey, wait, it's pumpkin soup season. I need to make sure I run over and get some of that for lunch because that sounds amazing. But you might also be thinking, I really want to change location. Maybe the food truck worked really well one location one day, and then the next one you had to move on. Obviously, you want to make sure your customers know where you are at all times. So now you might be sending a new message out and letting them know, hey, change locations, and you might be sending a link, dropping them to the new location that you're at so that they know to come running as quickly as possible. And lastly, what you probably want to be thinking about is this amazing word of mouth that you've started getting in the area. How do I translate that into reviews online, which is also going to be the best version of online word of mouth? So what you're going to be thinking about now is potentially sending out a link in bio via text. And in that link in bio, you're going to be linking out to all the different review pages that you have that people can share on. And the reason you want to potentially link out to multiple ones is that we all know not everyone is a Yelper. Not everyone wants to write on Google Plus. So you can give them options, make it that much easier for them to press 1, 2, 3, and all of a sudden you can help grow your 5-star reviews as well.
I love it. Thank you so much for the advice. I've been taking copious notes, and because I'm using so many of these Bitly products, like you mentioned, it'll make it very easy. We had a couple questions that I want to tee up to you after you talk maybe specifically about an example, because there's so many use cases for one-to-many marketing that people can think about with SMS. Loyalty programs, you touched on that a little bit, surveys. So are there any in specific that you would call out that we should think about as we think about this one-to-many, more of a marketing distribution channel via SMS?
So let's tailor this a little bit more and pivot to more verticals, because again, obviously food truck, although the different examples I shared can definitely be relevant for a lot of different verticals, but you really want to be thinking of that one to many and thinking about what's more relevant here. You don't necessarily want metrics on individual people, but you want to make sure you can get out the messaging to a lot of individuals. So let's think potential retail. And what might that look like? It could be sending out promotions or discounts where you're ultimately taking them back to your website to a discounted page, especially with holidays coming up. You might be sending out Black Friday or holiday promotions in general, and then making sure you can track that back on the back end afterwards as well. Another great example can be payment processing. So let's say we actually work with a company and they offer monthly auto pay options to their customers. So when a payment is placed, they send their customers a text message letting or confirming that the auto payment has gone through. In that message, they also include a link to their payment portal. And this allows people and customers to simply press that link and they can log into their own individual account where they can view the payments and view the full history of payments. The other part of this is that that link that they shared, it is a custom link. So the beauty is that, let's say they turn that into their custom domain plus the backend says payment. That means that if I'm getting this link every single month, I'm more likely to remember it. So if I actually need to access that payment portal, I'm most likely going to type that into my browser at some point because it makes life that much easier. I know it's coming from you. I know it's consistent, and it really tells me what this link is about. But the things you want to be thinking about here, as far as the one-to-one, is branding, as mentioned. So you want to take the opportunity not just to use the custom domain, but customize the backend, especially if we're thinking about a link that's being sent to multiple individuals. But the other part you want to think about is the ability to redirect. So that same payment example, if I needed to change where that's pointed to, I can at any point of time. And all those customers who've already taken the time to memorize this link and type it in any time, they're still going to be able to keep using it. You don't have to change any of that behavior. But also metrics. So this is going to be really important because all those metrics are coming in on that same link. So you can really see that high level snapshot of the engagement. And as mentioned before, you can really have an idea if there's different pockets based on different cities that you're seeing different engagement on. It really allows you to see the whole campaign within one link view.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah, for walking that through. I'm going to apply a lot of that to my food truck business. Before we hop into the second section of how people are using SMS, which is really that personalization at scale that Hannah had touched on, I want to address a few questions that we're seeing come through the Q&A within the chat as well. The first is around deliverability, and we hear this a lot when it comes to SMS. And a few folks have shared when they are using short link services, not all providers are open to using those. You touched on custom domains a little bit. Do you have any best practices recommendations? I know we'll talk about it in a little bit, but right now that you'd address, how can we make sure that these short links can be, one, accepted by the SMS provider, but two, is best practice for really getting your brand in front of more folks?
Yep. So as mentioned before, one of the key aspects here, especially for SMS, is using that custom domain. So links that are not branded, they come in as bit.ly. Those are more likely to get blocked by cell phone carriers, whereas using a custom domain is best practice for that specific reason. So you want to make sure that every link that you are sharing has your custom domain or potentially has a subdomain if that makes more sense for your use case and your brand.
That's great. So the custom domain and the customized URL from beginning to end really is how folks can make sure that there's deliverability baked into the process. So if you currently have an SMS provider and you are wanting to bring in Bitly, make sure you're using custom domains. We're going to talk about how folks can crawl, walk, run through an SMS strategy in a little bit. So for folks that haven't done it yet, don't worry, you'll have some. For those folks that are in it right now, we're going to talk about some ways you can enhance it. One more question I want to tee up to you, Hannah, and I'm happy to chime in here too, because I've definitely got a perspective around how we can do this in best practices. But Veronica was wondering if there's a number of messages that we recommend to send once per week or how many per month. What is too many? And I'd actually ask folks in the chat to also weigh in of what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, and what their best practices are there too. But Hannah, do you have a common number or even just a recommendation that you give to your customers when they ask this question?
So I don't have a specific common number, but again, it's all going to really depend on your specific use case and what you're sending out. But that said, you want to use this sparingly. You don't want to be sending out, you most likely don't want to be sending out messages weekly, but it's also going to depend on, again, what exactly are you sharing? And especially as we're going to pivot into one-to-many messaging, some messages might be time sensitive and it might be based on actions that a consumer is taking. So they might be getting a lot. If you're sending out a promotion that's going out to everyone, then you want it to be relevant. So if you're sending out one promotion daily or a promotion weekly, again, you want to start thinking about how am I really catching the interest of my consumers? versus having them potentially opt out because they received too many. But again, a lot of these questions are going to depend a lot on your specific use case. So it's really important to be mindful of consumer behaviors and also what personal preferences might be, but also really what are you sharing and is it relevant? How frequently do they need to get that content?
Yes. I have nothing to add to that. Chris said it well in the chat as well. The answer can only be answered by level of value. So are you providing something of value, something that the audience member wants to engage with or wants to know? You're going to see if they don't in your click-through rates and any sort of opt-out or unsubscribe rate. So measuring that is really important. But starting with, am I sharing something of value that the customer would want to know? Is a really good place to start. And then you can build your strategy around that. So happy to get into specifics there as folks figure out what works for different industries or verticals. I do want to keep us moving into the next section of where we're seeing SMS become really powerful. And this is where we really see the conjunction around customer experience start to come to life. So Hannah, why don't you tell us a little bit about personalization at scale?
Absolutely. So we're now going to pivot into one-to-one messaging. And the difference now is that you're sending an individual link to each single customer. So you might be sending it again to 100, thousands, or millions of individual users. But the difference is that even though everyone's getting their own separate message, they're also getting their own specific link that's tied to them. And the reason for this is that you really want to have a better understanding of your customers and understanding the metrics and really what their journey looks like. So within this use case, some of the bigger differences you're going to see is that Bitly will very likely be working extremely closely with third-party tools within your tech stack. So away from the SMS provider, we'll probably be working hand in hand with your CRM tool, so your customer relationship management tool. And the reason this is so important is that you are most likely really laser focused on understanding buying behaviors of individual customers and really creating those individual profiles where you can really map out how every interaction and really what their journey with your brand has looked like. And because of that, you want to have everything tailored to them specifically versus sending out the same communication. So for this use case and how it relates to Bitly is you're going to want to be thinking about individual short links. So we're going to be thinking about scale. We're most likely sending out thousands. We can easily scale up to millions if and when needed. But you want to thinking about not just how many messages do I need, but how many short links do I need? And then you want to start thinking about our API. Of course, if you're creating thousands or millions of links, you're not creating them manually. So in this case, you're going to be relying heavily on our API to make sure that we're integrated in and can shorten in real time or shorten in bulk as needed. And then also you're going to be thinking about metrics. So once you're starting to filter through and you're looking at thousands of metrics and thousands of links, you're not going to want to do this in the UI. You're going to want to rely heavily on our API to either pull information into whatever the third-party tool you're using, or most likely you'll be using webhooks so that we can send appropriate updates in real time so that you have your own location where you're really filtering through all the metrics and the information that you're getting.
That's great. Hannah, we have a few questions that are coming in about specific tools. Now, we won't necessarily cover SMS providers within this conversation. Highly recommend if folks are using them to drop them in the chat so others can learn and dig in a little bit there. We do have a good resource that we can share after the fact too. That is a bit of a roundup of the different SMS providers. That being said, what you just mentioned is really important, pulling into the different systems that we're currently using. And so you mentioned being able to use with the CRM, sometimes through a direct integration. The API is really important. Now, with these tools, whether it be Salesforce Marketing Cloud, or I even saw someone mention Pipeline CRM, there's a lot of different CRMs out there. Do the personalized URLs that Bitly can create, the custom domains, do those also work through something like the API, or is it limited to just the generic Bitly?
So everything that you can create in the UI and offers within Bitly, you can also do via API. So branding, again, key. That's definitely something that you can do via the API. It's really no different. You're just creating it instead of creating it manually. You're just calling our API to create the link instead. So think of the API and the Bitly UI as the same thing. You're just creating the link in a different method.
Awesome. Thank you. I would highly encourage folks to continue to ask those questions in the chat of us and each other. We'll follow up on any of those specific use cases specific to the tool that you're using if we can provide some insight. But this is a great community of folks you can tap into of how they're leveraging it as well. But if you're thinking about your CRM, you're thinking about bringing Bitly short links, whether it's personalized or not, within your stack. And again, personalized and custom domains for sure when we think about SMS. Sometimes you're using Bitly for other marketing purposes. You can do that through the API. So that's great to know. So why don't we go real quick through any examples or mentions that you have for me around my food truck. So anything I should do or any recommendations you have for how I can start to get out of doing kind of my one-to-many marketing and start doing one-to-one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously business is now booming. So you want to start thinking about, one-to-one. You've invested in a new CRM. Maybe you've even decided to move away from the food truck and actually go into a location. So let's talk about what that looks like down the line. First off, you have a million different receipts that are coming in, and you're obviously worried about the environment. So let's cut down all the paper. And what you're now going to do is when customers are making a purchase, you're going to give them the option of you sending them a text message linking to their receipt instead. So it's win-win. The customer doesn't get a new receipt they have to figure out what to do with. You don't have to print one. And in theory, we're helping the world, even if it's just a little bit. The other thing, now that you're in a location, you might want to start bringing food to your customers instead of them coming to you. So you hire a whole bunch of new people and you're going to start doing deliveries. So the difference here is that obviously this is going to be very tailored to one-on-one communication because they want to know where their food is coming from. So you're going to start sending a text message when someone places an order, confirming that the order has been placed and linking to where they can track their food delivery. Easy breezy. But also you might want to take it the next step up and do something similar to a lot of food delivery services we see today, where after the food has been dropped off, you're going to send them another message where you link to a photo of their food sitting on their doorstep. And that's especially relevant if I live in New York and I'm on the 10th floor. I need to run down and get my food ASAP before someone else happens to get there first. So these are just some potential different versions you could be working with. But again, you want to be thinking about one-to-one messaging. So what's most relevant for someone to receive that's only going to be relevant for them.
That's great. Thank you for that. My food truck business is going to just be the best. You did hit on a few examples within one-to-one. I'm wondering if you have any other recommendations, or as we're thinking about, we're coming up on our scheduled time because we answered a lot of questions throughout. If you think we should jump to talking through the crawl, walk, run. What do you think, Hannah?
Do we have 2 more minutes left? In that
We
case,
do. We do.
I think we could jump to crawl, walk, run and best practices.
I love it. Let's start with some crawl, walk, run recommendations for how people can think about SMS campaigns. For those that do have to drop at the 45-minute mark proper, we're going to share the recording after the fact. We're going to share the resources in this deck as well. So we definitely understand, want to be respectful of time, but we'll spend maybe a few minutes going through a few of these sections. Hannah, take it away. What are some top line recommendations in each of these?
So top line is first, when we're walking, you're thinking about SMS providers. Which one do you want to work with? What works the best for you, for your budget? What kind of messaging are you going to be sending out? Is it going to be the one-to-one or one-to-many? That's most likely where you're going to be starting the conversation. And we typically see starting with one-to-many messaging. And again, what's really important is understanding what is relevant content that you're sending out. And then you're going to start sharing this out. I will share a few best practices on the Bitly side as well here in a second. But the next thing that you want to start thinking about when you're walking is KPIs. So you want to understand, what are your KPIs? What really am I looking for? And understanding that as you're sending it out so that you can then update and make changes to the campaign as needed based on those results. And those KPIs can be based on how many clicks did you receive, and comparing one campaign to the next to better understand when did you have better engagement. If you sent in the morning, in the afternoon, at night, was there a specific day that resonated more? But really making sure that you're utilizing the information at hand that you have so that you can improve the next campaign being sent out. But the second part you're going to be thinking about when you're walking is, how else is your company and your initiatives tailored towards SMS, because most likely there's other people at your company who are now starting to take notice of the fact that you have a custom domain, you're sharing this out. We want to keep that branding consistent within your organization. And there's most likely other teams who are also doing similar campaigns or similar initiatives. And you want to start talking with your other teams to make sure that we can have one unified location for you to utilize not just the branding, but really utilize the resources you have at hand and keep helping build that customer journey. And as part of that, you're most likely starting to talk to your CRM team. So then we're going to get into our run phase. Now we're really integrating with multiple different teams, and specifically or most likely talking very engagedly with your CRM team. They're really interested in knowing the exact customer journey for every single customer that you have. They want to be integrated with Bitly, and they want to potentially start scaling this where we're sending out millions of links. So we want to start thinking about how many links. We want to start thinking about what type of campaigns, how frequently you're sending them, how are you going to be creating the links? Are you creating them over a matter of minutes, days, hours, weeks, month? There's a lot of different questions we're going to want to talk to. So for all of these, I would always recommend reaching out to Bitly and reaching out to your customer success manager if that's a feature that you have, but making sure that you're talking through and having an open conversation about what you're looking to do so that we can also help best advise of next best steps for you and your specific use case.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I know, much like we talked with short links, a lot of this is so configurable to someone's business, but we do have some best practices we want to share for scaling Bitly with your SMS strategy. I will note before you jump into that, I've seen a couple specific questions of folks wondering how they can incorporate Bitly within their SMS strategy based on where they're currently at. We will follow up with folks to make sure that we get you the answer that you need. So thank you for the questions and keep them coming through. So Hannah, close us out with a few best practices that you recommend for where and how folks pull Bitly into the process.
Perfect. So I'm going to try to keep it brief, but I think a lot of the questions we've gotten actually centers around this. So keep in mind, as part of Bitly, the Bitly best practices are going to be really important for the short URL that you're sending out as part of that SMS campaign. First one is you want to be using the custom domain. Again, using the custom domain means it's more likely to be blocked if it is a bit.ly, so you want to make sure you're using that custom domain. The other part, which is really important, is that you want to include the HTTPS when you're sharing that short link. I get this question a lot from my partners, and the reason being, I'm sending out a text message, character count matters. Can I remove that because that will impact the character count? The answer is, you can, but no, you shouldn't. And the reason you don't want to is that you want to make sure it's a hyperlink. And depending on the different phone carriers, they might not hyperlink it for you unless it includes the HTTPS. And if you don't have a hyperlink, it means someone's going to have to copy and paste that link and put it into the browser, which again, not ideal because we want it to be a really flawless customer journey where they're just receiving a text and they can press the link and immediately be popped into wherever they need to be. The other thing we want to talk about is measuring. So again, we already touched on KPIs and metrics, but it's really about making sure that you are aware of what results you're looking for and making sure that you are best set up to understand how you're going to pull those results. So again, if you're doing one-to-many, then looking in the UI might be where you want to tailor and spend your time. If we're doing a high volume one-to-many or one-on-one, you definitely want to be thinking about our API and webhooks, having those webhooks already enabled by the time you're started so that it's a simple process. And the minute you start getting clicks, you're getting those metrics in to whatever location you need to be. And then lastly, I touched on this before, especially when we're talking about one-to-one messaging, you want to be thinking about rate limits. So you want to be thinking not just how many messages am I sending and how many short links am I creating, but when am I creating them and how frequently am I creating them? Am I going to create 2 million links over 2 days? Great. But even within those 2 days, what does that look like? what kind of scale do I actually need? And a lot of these conversations are going to be conversations you're having directly with Bitly, because we want to make sure that we're setting you up for success and that it's smooth sailing. But the best way to do that is making sure that you're thinking about how you're sending them out, sharing it back with us so that we can make sure that we set you up from day one.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Hannah, for all of this. Obviously, SMS and thinking about short links is super helpful to go to that high level of how do we think about our best practices? How do we set it up right? But it's only powerful if we configure it for our use case. I'll go back to what Chris had shared in the chat of, is it valuable? Is the answer to the question of how much, how many, whether do one to many, one to one. And so I encourage everybody to think about that. We're going to share some follow-up resources after the fact that hits on some of those points of how you can go a little bit deeper into thinking about how to apply it to your strategy. We'll talk about short links, best practices, all of that kind of stuff. But I do want to thank everyone for your time today. We are a bit over, so I want to be respectful of the time block that we had. We may have to make these a little bit longer moving forward because we're getting a lot of questions that we're going through throughout. And I do appreciate that you've spent some time here, Hannah, talking through all the different ways that you advise your customers on a day-to-day basis how they can make SMS more effective to them, in addition to using it for everything related to short links. So final QR code resource we have here, feel free to scan, check the short link. I will send it after the fact as well. So you have that in your inbox. So if you don't get a chance to click it here, we've done our questions, but Hannah, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the audience being here and participating in the chat today. Super helpful. Devin coming in at the end with a recommendation for a show, Interview with the Vampire. I love it. That's amazing. I'm seeing all these questions come through. So I know we're not able to get to all of them, but I will follow up with everyone who did have a question that is outstanding and make sure that you get your answer. So Hannah, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, and have a great day, everyone.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. We will make sure that we reach out to folks that have individual specific questions and use cases, and we hope that we can help you put all of your strategies to work. So we're always here to help. Reach out to us. Otherwise, we'll follow up with next steps, and we hope to see you on the next conversation in early December. Check your inboxes soon for an invite. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.